Namaste. Welcome to this cosmic congregation of SLB enthusiasts interested in getting acquainted with the English translation novels Anchu. Through this platform, I am happy to make new acquaintances from out of the ever-swelling fraternity of SLB readers. I am also fortunate to be the pretext for another of SLB's novels reaching English readers. Thanks to Suresh of culture.in for his interest in organizing this. I'll take a minute. As announced, I will take you through the writing ways of Sri SLB, the story of Brink, select reading from it, and my experiences as the translator of the novel. I am also threatened with a question answer session which I am not at all confident of handling, but I will not shy away either. In this discourse, the words kavya not necessarily means poetry. Most of the paths, directions, and extents which make themselves available during the process of writing will be unanticipated. It is this unanticipated that is real creation. This penning process, which brings the imperceptible to perception, is an unusual experience that entails great anticipation, exhilaration, extreme feelings, and rapture. Especially the appointed hour of commencing writing is stirred with great anticipation and turmoil, a feeling of fear akin to groping in a dense forest in the dark. The turmoil persists until the eyes get acclimatized. Then the forms emerge from within the dark, and light setting in, the path appears clear, and I arrive at the point of no return, namely the point of impossibility to check myself from moving forward. Then on it is a cakewalk, no anxiety. Mostly, I have seen through the end of a novel that I have embarked on. To pen some of it now, some later, some at leisure time is not in my disposition. Therefore, when I am engaged in writing, I will not receive guests, won't read newspapers, and won't even listen to music, which at other times is an endearing pastime of mine. Only that the novel is true. My routine life and world are rendered static. I will get excessively angry if any hindrance is caused to the process of truth that unfolds by the second. After I am finished with the writing, my body would be drained. Mind, though, will stand emancipated. Vacuum too. These are the experiences that I go through during the initial composition of the work, first draft. After I am done with it, the feel of it and the after effects reign my mind for months. But it's time to fully be rid of it. I should indulge in other studies, should go on travel, should become a new person. In about 1.5 or 2 years, I will become a renewed individual. By then, 1 or 2 of my friends would have read the manuscript and thoroughly and critically deliberated on it. Equipped with that, I read it. Now would show up the slime and grime which the tempo of composition would have raised in its wake. All these have to be cleansed. Some sections may need to be rephrased. Some portions have to be rewritten, or as with Grahana and Anveshana, they have to be entirely rewritten. In this later exercise, there is the need for the detached disposition of a critic. The critical evaluation by friends will aid in alienating myself from my work and viewing it with detachment. After reading, I will consign the manuscript to the shelf and distance myself from it by engaging in some other activity. I will read it again I will put it away, again I will read it. By the time this exercise has gone through 4 or 5 rounds, details of all the fine-tuning it needs would be clear in my mind. I will make a note of all that, move to an isolated location on the outskirts of the town, and give it a final form by amending every point. By then, its influence on me will have completely rid. The rapture will have abated. Free from all this, when I read the manuscript for the last time, it would have lost appeal. By the time I read the final draft on the eve of sending it for print, I would be so vexed with it as not to touch it with my hands for life. I have never attended to proofreading. Yes. Now, I come to the second point about Brink. That's about his writing ways. He has stated it succinctly and in all detail also. Then about Brink. Here too, I'll read out the first para, which is a small paragraph, and then tell something synoptically about the novel. Somashekar wasn't so haughty as to deem it befitting of an architect functioning from a panelled office to only conceive and design new buildings, not counsel in the matter of refurbishing old ones. Not until now, though. Sprawling turf on Dalitamal Road on the outskirts of Mysore. Apparently, it wasn't repaired since construction, and by the very fact of its antiquity, one could aver that the wood used for doors and windows was pure teak. Only in the good old days was timbering synonymous with teak. One glimpsing the 15-foot high roof can't help reflecting on its suitability for suicidal lynching. Two cracks have developed right in the middle of the roof, causing water to seep and pool on the floor below when skies opened up. Soaked and stained in the rainwater, the exquisite mortar floor was unsightly. Landlady Dr. Amrita's car was old too, an early model Fiat, weathered by sun and rain and appearing antiquated, but as sturdy as the house. This leakage has to be plugged. Entire house has to be repainted. How much will it cost totally? You have to get it done, please, she says to Somashekar, and that is the genesis of a love affair between the two. She is an estranged woman, a mother of two small boys. She has a PhD in Kannada and she is a university lecturer. He is an architect, a widower who has lost his lone child also. They get friendly, they get close, they get intimate, and then all hell breaks loose. Having lost her mother early, she falls into the care of her aunt, a scheming aunt, who appoints herself as a guardian fraudulently, dubiously. So Amrita suffers treachery at the hands of this aunt initially and later at the hands of her husband in the matter of her estate, both real estate and family jewel cash, and in the matter of her marriage and in the matter of procreation also. Those who read the original will know. So all this has bottled up in her and it has to be vented. There is a need for a receptacle and Somashekar is available. She vents all her indignation on Somu. She detests him, derides him, shames him, assaults him. She subjects him to all sort of torture. They very frequently quarrel. She is depressed because of all this and attempts to suicide 22 times. Even the 22nd attempt is unsuccessful. It is worth noting as to what induced her each time to attempt suicide and what deterred her from committing suicide each time. All the same, this story is not a catalogue of her suicide attempts with some drama thrown in for effect. The proceedings are very real and are intelligible to a practicing psychiatrist. That is the amount of homework that has gone into this by Sri SLB. Her suicide attempts are all well embedded, in fact organically embedded in a complete chunk of story with all the small and big characters receiving due treatment. This is a 400 plus pages of novel and half the storyline occupies about half of this by volume. The other half is the delineation of the cathartic tirade between the two lovers. As I told you, they quarrel very frequently. See, we may think of 2, 3, 5 instances of a pair fighting, but how may one think up of so many instances and properly, organically embed in the novel? Because they can't be isolated events. They have to gel with the story. To think it up in such copiousness is the ingenuity of Sri SLB. This novel views man-woman relationship from physical, moral and philosophical standpoints. I told you there have been 22 unsuccessful attempts. The deterrents in all these 22 are not all of them are very potential. They are not surefire deterrents. In some cases she could have she could have committed the suicide. Anybody else would have committed the suicide. But there are 3 surefire instances which have proved true deterrents. Let's see what they are. Her regular method of committing suicide is take a revolver, go out of the Chamundi Hill in midnight or in the small hours of the day. On one such visit, she is there atop the hill at midnight. Revolver is ready and primed. Her finger is on the trigger. She is about to pull it when she sees the moon, when she sights the moon. Then that sends her into a reflecting mode. She thinks, the moon trudges, bearing all the griefs of the likes of me. His grief is greater than mine. What tears I shed in a lifetime, the same amount he spills over the whole universe in about a minute in the form of moonlight and veins. His loneliness is precisely the same as mine. Now, what does this mean? The metric for her grief is not her own grief. Usually what we say, people usually say, nobody has suffered like me, nobody is as grieving as me, nobody is sorrowful. Because the metric for our grief is our own grief. There is no external benchmark to assess the relative intensity of our grief. But Amrita is sensible. She compares her grief with that of the moon. She says, his grief is greater than mine. His loneliness is precisely the same as mine. So her own grief is relegated to second place. Something takes precedence, and this deters her from committing a nonsensical or senseless or careless act like. So that is one of the surefire deterrents. Next, her husband is a corrupt bureaucrat. In fact, I have one grievance against SLB. He has named her husband after me. Amrita is damn sure that her husband will not salvage the estate and run it. She doesn't want that to happen. Also, she has instituted a plaint against her aunt for recovering her estate, which she has embezzled. So, on many of her attempts, she thinks, why am I not able to just pull the trigger? There is really no time gap. I just have to do it. Why am I not doing? Then once this thought comes to her that probably she will not kill herself till this plaint is decreed. This means that if you take up a responsible act, then that will take precedence, and your grief takes a back seat, and so that serves as a deterrent. Not just the plate. She is a college lecturer. She has to prepare for the next day's classes, and there is her coffee estate, and every now and then she receives communication from the manager, some diesel, some pesticides, some harvesting season, then coffee board notices, bank loan, interest, and she can't leave it to the manager. She has to go there and sit with him and resolve it. From Mysore she has to go to there. So if you take up a responsible act, then that will serve to sideline your grief and then prove a deterrent to committing suicide. Because most of us are idle, and you have a sterling example right before you. The first line of this novel I translated in 2001, and now it is 2020. I have taken 20 years, we may say. Then the third reason is really profound. She reflects, if I were dead, the children will somehow grow. There is the father, there is the grandmother, and there is the estate. They will somehow grow. But what about Somu? He has nobody. He becomes an orphan. There is nobody to look after him. So that is her genuine concern. And in fact, this in effect is discerning a ground for living on. So these are the surefire deterrents. Then about this Somashekar, the main male character, he eventually helps her to come out of the depression. And how does he do it? He impresses upon her selflessness in the matter of her estate. He tells her, don't hanker after that. You forget it. Even if you win the plaint and get back your estate, donate it to them, your cousins. Or if you don't want to donate it to them, donate it to some other cause. You don't keep any of it. I will look after you. Now this selflessness is very much a part of our makeup traditionally. This Nishkama Karma is evident in, is spelled in Bhagavad Gita. The prescription is lucid there. And she is wise enough to be receptive to his counsel. And this makes it possible for her to come out of her depression without the need for psychiatric assistance. See, the author has endeavored to discern a situation where a solution is possible, and he has gone on to write that story. A good fraction of all earthly sufferings can be addressed satisfactorily. So we should engage ourselves in that. The nagging other half should not deter us from being proactive in mitigating the hardship, alleviating the hardship mutually. This is very beneficial to the society. DVG's words are worth noting here. Family, community, town, state, nation, etc. are the domains where we have to deploy our souls in, and such acculturation is a must for every one of us. Maybe my translation is not very apt, so I'll tell DVG's words in the original. ಕುಟುಂಬ, ಕುಲ, ನಗರ, ರಾಜ್ಯ, ರಾಷ್ಟ್ರ ಮುಂತಾದವೆಲ್ಲವೂ ಆತ್ಮವಿಸ್ತರಣಾಭ್ಯಾಸಕ್ಕೆ ಒದಗಿ ಬರುವ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ಷೇತ್ರಗಳು. ಇವುಗಳ ಕೆಲಸಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಪಾಲುಗೊಳ್ಳುವುದು ಪ್ರತಿಯೊಬ್ಬನಿಗೂ ಆಗಲೇಬೇಕಾದ ಸಂಸ್ಕಾರ. कुटुंब, कुल, नगर, राज्य, राष्ट्र आदि आत्मविस्तरणाभ्यास में काम आने वाली कार्य क्षेत्र है. अपने को इनमें भाग लेकर संस्कार पाना हर एक व्यक्ति को अवश्य है. To discern the philosophical base. For most of the average reader, it is the readability that matters, and bringing to the average reader and profound to the discerning. For this, I will have to recount as to what exactly goes into the making of a novel. Literature is a depiction of life, but it's not a photograph of life. A literator observes life, he studies it, he assimilates it, he makes an amorphous mass of it in his mind, and then he recasts it as a story. Now, in life are bhavas, and when they are recast as a novel or fiction, they become rasas. Now there are a definite number of rasas, bhavas, and there are the corresponding rasas. For the rati bhava of life, there is the shringara rasa of literature. For the hasa bhava of life, there is the hasya rasa of literature. For the krodha bhava, there is the raudra rasa. Similarly, shoka bhava, karunya rasa. Jigupsa bhava, bhibhatsa rasa. Bhaya bhava, bhayanaka rasa. Utsaha bhava, veera rasa. Vismaya bhava in life, same is adbhuta rasa in fiction. Then kutuhala bhava and dhira rasa. This dhira rasa you can notice in our Bond movies and Intel movies like Die Hard series and Mission Impossible series. And there is the culminating Shanta rasa. It is because of this transformation of the bhavas to rasas that literature gives us solace. Life can't give us solace. Life is barbaric. Literature gives us solace, and hence the need to pursue literature. And hence such worthwhile literature have stood the test of time. Our epics and classical literature are examples. SLB has himself once said on the occasion of the 50th anniversary of Vamshavriksha, said, "Permanence is my reward." And that is the real reward. Just as there are many shades of red color, and just as there are variations of a raga, there are many nuances of rasas, and hence the inexhaustible possibilities of literary creativity. The mainstay of all SLB's novels is Shantarasa, and it is in the incidental rasas, the incidental rasas therein dish up delight. This scholar in our midst, Dr. R. Ganesh, has analyzed this and other novels of SLB and has given us some insights. I will recount 4 of them. There are those that are committed to us. How may we then say that we shall not commit ourselves to others? Next. Dr. Amrita conducts herself affably with everybody, but tortures the one person that streams love towards her, her compassionate companion Somashekar. The reason is that such a latter one is an uncommon breed, and not just Dr. Amrita, most of us do not know how to interact with them. We take them for granted. We do not recognize their worthiness till it is too late. We keep ignoring them. We don't know that they are concerned about us. The next one is more profound. All said and done, it is the faculty of the heart that affords us diversity in life. Corporeal propensity is utterly limited. Next, brink is the apex of passion, a point at which one either regresses to safety or tumbles over detrimentally. What this novel Brink is founded on is the alleviative potential of compassion, by way of which Somshekhar assuages Dr. Amrita's depressed state and also hands himself a fresh lease of life. Now I come to the third point, select reading. I have told you they quarrel frequently. Once, when he has faced physical assault from her, he exits from her house, drives up to Kukarali tank, and sits on a stone bench on the bund. After a while, he got up, limbered so as to expunge all the aches from all the organs of his body, and walked up to his scooter. By the time he traversed about half a furlong, he felt as if the kinetics of his motor nerves went kaput, and he came to a halt. He felt it impossible to pace one more. Will I tread any further at all, or will I drop dead here? Are both my legs paralyzed? He had a misgiving. He checked by lifting an arm. He lifted and swayed his other arm too. Arms, eyes, ears don't seem to be affected. With his left hand, he stroked his left cheek where she had slapped. Still smarts. The moment he got conscious of the smarting, the nerves of his legs seemed to be remedied. What connection? It's all in the mind. Once he goes to Mumbai on receiving an invitation over phone by his erstwhile business partner Shah. So Shah has landed a big commission of a factory. He wants to design it and all, and this Somshekhar architect, they work together, and he wants his assistant now, so he summons him for 2 weeks. Amrita is not concerned about all these subtleties. She has her own reasons for why he went to Bombay. Partner called. When did he call? Angry and dejected at me, he has gone on his own to consult his friend as to a future course of action on being slapped on the cheek by a certain woman whom he had befriended. This is the urgent work. Consultation. What advice would the friend give? Why do you need the company of such a woman, man? Stay away from her. She was sure that this advice would be dispensed. He will also share with him my desire and urge to shoot myself with the revolver. Then this is a good opportunity. Just shed her. Naveen Shah, a very successful administrator that he is, very many times he has himself sung in praise of this friend of his. When he returns after 2 weeks, he will not have remained my Somu. She told herself to rest assured that he would have morphed into Mr. Somshekhar. She gets very formal. Once what has happened, she had mortgaged her house and raised a loan from 2 lakh from her bank to give it to Somu for him to purchase the commercial premises for his architect's office. And as long as that liability was there, he was feeling diffident to face her all these fights. That loan was serving as an encumbrance. So he thought he was getting very pretentious with her. So he wanted to get rid of the loan. So he asked his friend Naveen Shah to telex the funds from Mumbai, and the same day he transfers it to her bank and clears the loan, and now he is relieved. Now he says, I can now face her, whatever her torture or beating or assault, anything. Once earlier what has happened, Somshekhar, while he was in Mumbai, he had befriended a Madrasi woman and they were meeting twice a week. And on one such meeting, she borrows 25 rupees from him for taxi fare because she has not gone to the bank to draw it. Now, on their very next visit, the first thing she does is return the 25 rupees. Somshekhar is pained. Why should I not give you 25? Why you should return? Then she says, if I accept money from you, what will it mean? What will our relationship mean? So, he will not insist. Now, Amrita puts 2 and 2 together. She is pained that he has repaid the loan. She says, you shall nevertheless maintain that the two are different. What you have on mind is that she repaid what she borrowed for taxi fare and she had no time to go to the bank. Simple reason. The reason for you arranging funds by telex is different, for you never inflicted upon her anything so mean as striking with a defiled palm, right? Speak up the truth. Though the reply took shape in his mind that it was not in his disposition to mouth what was obvious, he contained it so as not to let it arrive even at the threshold of the vocal cords. When a small twitch here and he will read the mind, she will read his mind. And again, bark at him. This is the tightrope walking that he has to do with her. There are many such instances. That day, Amrita was in depressing moods. Such days, she wouldn't scoff any at him. Neither would she speak any. She would serve his meal silently and have hers equally silently. When in that state of mind, she would wish to be left alone. Refraining himself from going to her bedroom, he would retire to the guest room. She would be unto herself in her bedroom. He, however, was not to depart for reason of her desire for seclusion. Neither should he refrain from visiting at all. He should be in attendance, but she should be free to remain distant and aloof. It would be her prerogative to start a conversation for words. He would comprehend the disposition of her mind and then respond accordingly as if nothing whatsoever had preceded. If she chose to speak jovially, he is to respond in the very same tenor and in equal measure. If he crossed the threshold even one bit and employed an affectionate word, she would bark at him. If he spoke amorously and if he gave just a plain jovial reply, she would seethe in disgrace. Aren't you indifferent, as if I were a bitch that accosts you over and over again shamelessly? Notwithstanding the fact that his mind and heart were at their nadir, he would instantly respond and align himself in tandem with her mental state, at times even lying down dutifully and tempering his physical propensities. At about 4 p.m., he heard her take the keys to the car and the house and get ready to fetch the children. When she wore her slippers and began pacing, he got up, dressed, and exited. She still was in no moods for conversation. In consonance with her moods, he exited. While he lounged on the bund of the Karanji lake, he reflected that he should be very cautious that night, because every night they are used to conversing over telephone for hours. If I call, she will object to it that I disturb her solitude. If I don't, feelings of void will get intense and she will take hold of the revolver. He told himself that he should discern and be ready with a topic for tonight's conversation. There is homework to do in love also. Next, if he said, your mood is not chipper, let us not go any place, she would say, you wanted a pretext to stay back, you put it on my moods. Instead of killing me by your devious ways, why not take a dagger and stab me? At least be honest. Dumbfounded, he would stay quiet, despondent. She would chide him. Mr. Somshekhar, should I formally invite you with all fanfare to come and sit in my car? The formal deferential argot would convey to him that her ire had graduated to the second degree boil. ಎರಡನೆಯ ಕುದಿಯನ್ನು ಮುಟ್ಟಿತು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತಾರೆ ಭೈರಪ್ಪನವರು. Next instance, once at dawn, he picks up the milk sachet and the newspaper, and being still sleepy, he returned to the cot without shutting the main door. She will visit at that hour as a mark of culmination of another bout of quarrel. A quarrel has happened a few days back, and she is now tapered down, and she wants to make amends by asking pardon of him, so she comes to his house. Mr. Somshekhar, her voice. He did not respond. The sound of entry, door shut and secured. She headed straight to his bedroom, entered, and without speaking any, not even caring to notice around, she rolled the bottom of his blanket a bit and hugged his feet in a way rendering them unable to move. Not just hold them, as she had added the weight of her head too, by pressing her face firmly on them, he could not move at all. He got angry, despised too. He thought that this was a shameless one. He could not resist or ask her to let go of his feet or extend his arm and shove her head aside. Cognizant that the feel of her face against his feet would pervade the depths of his mind if he shut his eyes, he lay still with his eyelids open. So, sight is serving as sentry for feelings. In page 11, he says, she has called him and she comes 15 minutes early. I have arrived here ahead of appointed time, he says. To which she says, I knew, therefore I waited awaited you here at the right time. She smiles gaily, he too smiles goodwill. By the time it is page 26, they have quarreled. She was by the gate awaiting his arrival. She seemed confident that he would visit. He felt a setback when he became cognizant that he had fallen tightly in place. Now no goodwill, only ill will. He recalled her smartness in ensuring his visit without giving him room for hedging. Rascal. As expected, she stood by the gate. The white stones of her ear studs shone, and her tender face shone brighter for reason of his visit. It is false that cruelty exists in her disposition, he thought. All through he has suffered torture at her hands, assault, derision, everything. Now he says it is false that cruelty exists in her disposition. So when she is in the other moods, that is the feeling he gets. Once she resolves to end herself by drowning in the KRS. Usually her usual modus operandi is a revolver atop the hill. But once she has visited KRS day before, and now that is the attraction. She did not waste a single moment. She got up, locked the main door, took the car out of the garage, shut the gate, and drove downtown. It was 11:30 p.m. She sped past the curve by the zoo, plied via Hardin Circle, Sayaji Rao Road and Dhanvantri Road, and hit the road to Kanambadi. Untikoppal went past. When she had driven past Sanatorium and the railway gate and entered crepuscular countryside, no dithering anymore. Only the gush of the Vishveshwaraya canal will be heard. The potent force of the churning waters will not be visible. What with sighting it? No need to close the eyes even. Just take the plunge. 15 minutes at the most. At this point, there is a very beautiful explanation. I don't have time here. She pressed on the gas. Driving speedily that she was, the fork where the road branched out to Srirangapatna pounced on her from out of the dark, and she had to apply the brakes abruptly to maneuver. The tires complained. Still, the car made contact with the signpost and the bonnet lost shape. She alighted and checked. Shouldn't have braked. All would have been done with in this crash itself. Anyway, she had gone to die. Why? What? Is it holy to drown oneself in KRS waters? I would have died in this accident itself. Why I braked? She repents. My bloody foot steps on the brake by sheer habit. To stay alive, there probably is no reason or justification other than sheer habit. In Raghuvamsha, Kalidasa summarizes it philosophically. Maranam prakriti sharirinam vikritir jivitam uchyate budhai. Then the next. The relationship with that Bombay girlfriend was a sort of exhilarating optimal alcoholism. This rather, with Amrita, is a potent emotion that nags by permeating not just the heart, mind and intellect, but also the nervous system, the circulatory system and the vertebra. At times when she resorted to logic, her intellect was wont to intricately dissect his circulatory, muscular and neurosystems, and through a magnifying lens look for the locus of the core vitals to dislodge it. And then the last incident, last reading. A sample of how quarrel begins. Now close your eyes. Tell me what you see when you close your eyes. What picture? She concealed his head in her bosom. Amrita appears. Bearing her, no other form appears, he whispered. Now, even if you lie, it is pleasant to hear. But as you are an honest man by nature, I feel like casting off the heavens. She closed her eyes as if to relish her words. In this intensity, minutes froze, sensing that she too was congealing time, not inclined to defrost it. He that had holed up in her bosom stayed still, taut, and with bated breath. He didn't know what was coming. A little later, she spoke up. Now, not only was her voice overt, explicit were inquiry and analytics rather than feelings. Somu, your words, nothing other than Amrita is visible to closed eyes, in themselves are more sticky sweet than honey. But I am your second woman, according to you, and if I believe your words. So this is how the quarrel goes on. There are many such instances in the novel. That brings me to the last section, my experience in translating this. I am a computer era kid, and if it were not for a P2 system that I bought long back in 2011, I would not have taken to translation either as a hobby or career. And the only reason I took to translating Brink is that the novel was on my computer table one day. And the actual reason for taking up translation is I had just bought this computer and I was in awe for MS Word. And I just wanted to play around with MS Word. So I could have as well typed something from my memory or even translated and typed something from a newspaper. Luckily, this book was there, so I translated one paragraph. And from the next day, over the next one and a half month, I kept reading it again and again and again. And each time I read it, I would the beginning of the novel. So there are just some about maybe 20 words and just about 2 pages. That would be sufficient. But if one were to give such a glossary for the other novels which I said, they would run into pages. Right. So in that sense, this is not really challenging as far as translation is concerned, but to be able to convey the mood of the novel, I took quite a lot of time.
In fact, I always felt Anchu is more of an English novel than a Kannada novel.
Oh, is it?
Okay.
I'll tell you the antithesis of it.
Right.
There is one person who read it in English and understood it in Kannada. I will tell you that. Okay. I'll tell you that. I'm thankful to Bhairappaji, and I am especially thankful to Niyogi Books of Delhi who published this, especially Dr. Nirmal Kanti Bhattacharya, who is the editorial director therein. On reading this, what Bhattacharya said was, the tale is fine, the story is fine. Now what does this mean? He has technically read it in the original. The translation has not proved a deterrent for understanding the novel. He has not met with the English at all. If he had met with the English, then he would have said the translation is good or poor or something. But he has said the tale is fine. It's really a reward for the translator, because the first rule of translation is the translation element should not be visible. And I'm happy that it has happened here. Actually, sorry, I'm flattering myself, but his appreciation is so genuine and natural that I am not able to resist it, even for modesty's sake. Namaste. Hello.
How much time it has taken you to translate that novel, Prasad?
I told you already. The first sentence was translated in 2001. And I told you for what purpose I translated, and I had no intent to fully go through the translation. Publishing was not in my mind at all. So I did it very leisurely, and there were periods of hibernation where I discontinued it for 2 years, 5 years. And initially when I took up the translation with that P2 computer, there was no internet also. So till the internet era, I was doing it very leisurely, and once I got the internet, it was very helpful. In fact, I would not translate anything if I had to do it on paper and pencil. So the internet has proved, and now I know how to harvest the internet for what I want. I am so much.
If you were to be interested in Excel sheet rather than MS Word, I wonder you would have become next to Shakuntala.
No. Oh my God. No. That is out of question. Thank you. So really nice. I took it. So there was a period of after I completed. So I would have done the entire translation over a period of say 1 decade. After that, it went to hibernation 6-7 years, and then I sent a printout to Bhairappaji, and then he asked me to send it to this Niyogi Books, and they were ready to publish it. So in all, from the date of first translation to today, 20 years.
So nice.
Thank you, Rajkumar.
And also, I wonder why Bhairappa sir has the last novel was, what was the name of the last novel, Prasad?
Last novel, Uttarakanda.
Uttarakanda. Before that, there was something related to space, no?
Yana.
Yeah. And the gap between Yana and Kavalu was, I think it was 7 years?
Something like that. That is about the average gap, because he has to... Yeah. Go on.
Yeah, that's all. The gap between Yana and Kavulu was around 7 years.
Yeah.
It was too huge to release a novel like Yana. And Yana was something which went beyond my head. It bounced my head every time I read a paragraph or a page. And I was wondering, why did Bhairappa venture into such kind of novel?
Uh-huh. You didn't like it?
Yeah.
You didn't like it?
No, I didn't like it. No, I didn't like it. Because
See,
mostly I didn't understand it.
I can say, no, understanding should not be a problem. I can say one thing, even in that Yana, when he has moved the human beings out of the earth, he still applies, he still causes the characters to think in terms of our traditional knowledge, whether our traditional knowledge of earth applies in space. So he has meditated on those terms. So we should grasp accordingly.
Thank you, Prasad.
Okay, namaste.
Mr. Prasad, this is Tarun.
Namaste.
Namaste. Yeah, great to see that actually that such a passionate thing has come up now. I mean, a decade is not a small time, you know. Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know how many times you must have gone through the book and actually translated. I can just understand.
Very good observation. Very good observation.
Yeah. And Joel note, I was just thinking actually that you're just mentioning about all the rasas actually in that. So just as a translator, actually just to understand that actually that you must have savored the complete the rasas actually, and you must be an expert in all those things. So what do you want to say about that?
The very nature of rasas is it should appeal even to the not so knowledgeable ones. Because the majority of readers are not conscientious readers, as I told you. So, by nature, by default, the rasas have to be very appealing. And that is why all our epics and they have survived the test of time. Because even very small villagers, they can relish the rasas in our whatever classics like Kumaravyasa Bharata or whatever. If you read Bhairappa's novels only, you can come to know that even villagers, that one farmer was conversant with some verses of Lakshmi Shastra. We can observe all that.
Yeah,
Great.
Sridhar here.
Yeah. So yeah.
Hello.
Hello?
I'm Sridhar here.
Okay, namaste.
I have the concern of directly hearing you.
Oh.
And my question is,
Ah.
after writing the full novel, so what was the feedback of Bhairappa and do you have to update on it?
It's echoing. What was the?
ಆಫ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀನಿ
ನೀವು ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಆಫ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಡೈರೆಕ್ಟಾಗಿ ಕೇಳಿ ವಾಟ್
Completing your novel,
ಹಾಂ
translation.
ಹಾಂ
So what was the feedback of Bhairappa? And did you have to update your novel, your writing to a great extent?
No, I told you I did it over a protracted period of time. As the previous participant asked, I would have gone through it very many times. I have gone through it some 50, 60, 70 times, and each time I have amended it. And if I read one more time, I will have some changes for the next print.
Your own reading, but
I'll come to that. So Bhairappa called me and said, in one call he said, ತುಂಬ ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದೀರಾ, ಅರ್ಧ ಓದಿದ್ದೀನಿ, ಓದಿಸ್ಕೊಂಡು ಹೋಗುತ್ತೆ, ತುಂಬಾ ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದೀರಾ. This is directly appreciating me is one thing. He has told the same to his friends. For example, he has told scholar Shatavadani Ganesh that Prasad has done it fine. And he has told another friend of his, Shekhar, ನೀನು ಓದು, ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ, ಮೂಲನೂ ಓದು, ಇಂಗ್ಲೀಷ್ ಅನುವಾದನೂ ಓದು, ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಸೊ ದಿಸ್ ಪರೋಕ್ಷ ಪ್ರಶಸ್ತಿ, that also I have earned. I am very happy about it all. Bhairappa is really very happy about it. Thank you.
Sir, I am Gopinath Iyer here.
Namaste, Heli.
Namaste, sir. This novel is very engrossing. I have just started reading it.
Okay.
And, I have to just confess that I have to keep a dictionary. My English will certainly improve. And the certain words that you have used are really exciting and nice to know them also, that they are in the English language. So you would have had great difficulty in identifying the proper words of the Kannada to see that the sanctity of the message is not lost. Really, congratulations to you, sir. I hope to finish the novel within a day or two.
Oh, thanks. I have a definite answer for your observations. You said there are some difficult words. See, that is how we grow. We
Yes.
don't grow by referring to a dictionary. In every book we read, some words will be beyond our vocabulary, and that is how we catch up with it. And when we meet that word next time, it is a little more clear. When we meet it again a third time, it will be much more clear. Maybe when we see it after that fourth or fifth attempt, we may want to look up the dictionary for the very precise meaning.
Yeah. Well said,
So
sir.
that is it is good to have a few words beyond the vocabulary, but that is not the main intention of mine. See, as you told, I should have had a hard time in getting the appropriate word. Actually, no, I gave you the answer because I am a computer era translator, and I know how to extract the right word from not just the dictionaries. There are many ways of zeroing on the right word. For example, a simple Google search within quotes will list out so many sentences where that word or that phrase is used. And by the number of entries, you can see whether it is used just 8 times or 8 lakh times. Then you know the 8 lakh times is the very proper one. So this way, I am very much conversant with the internet. And there is the thesaurus also. It was not really difficult.
Right.
But by
Congratulations.
definition,
It's really
a book
exciting.
will definitely be, some words will definitely be beyond the reach of every reader. Every book I have read belong in the same category. Yeah, you are telling
Sir,
something.
any next novel in the offing?
Not as of now. I will get back to you duly.
Sure. Okay, sir.
Are you my
Good day.
sister's colleague?
Yeah, exactly. True,
Okay.
sir.
Namaste.
Gopinath Iyer. I retired from the bank.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Since you have used the internet extensively, as you say, I have a very basic question. Is it possible to feed a novel like this to the translator, get some rough translation, go and then comment it based on the real, because some contextual meanings are always there.
Good question.
So is it really feasible to do that way?
My friend Sridhar here asks, is machine translation good and is it doable? See, to European languages, they have standardized it much. If you feed English and ask for some European Italian, it comes out fairly good. But Kannada, Hindi, Indian languages, there is the Google Translate itself is there. Maybe there are other tools also. I don't know. But it's still a long way to resort to Google. But I have known there is one software. I think the name is Trados. This what it makes, how it actually does is, you have to feed it a lot of translations. Source documents say English and translated Kannada. You have to feed it by hundreds and thousands of lakhs. Then it will recognize patterns and store it in its brain. So if you feed the nth document, it will take out from all this and it will give out a fairly good translation because it is doing its work based on database. Now as the number of feeding it increases, the perfection rate will go up. But for Kannada, there is nothing as of now. And here I want to make a jovial remark. You just go to Google Translate, you type one sentence, translate it to say Latin, put that Latin back here and translate to English, you will enjoy reading that English. The distortion is so much that it is a very good time pass. You may do it.
Mr. Prasad,
Yes.
good afternoon. I am Bhaskaran here.
Namaste, sir.
Namaste. I have a question because the gentleman raised the question of machine translation or Google translation. But there are many words in Indian Sanskrit which are not translatable in the same spirit in English.
Yeah.
For example, even a dharma. Are so many words in which
Dharma has gone to the English lexicon. Dharma is now in the English lexicon, you may use it.
as it is.
Dharma as it is in the same meaning.
Which are
Dharma, Nirvana, Kaki, so many words have gone into the English lexicon. You may use it
But this
freely.
Google translation, the context of Indian context, because whether it is a Karnataka or a Tamil Nadu or this thing, machine can give a translation, but it will not bring the real spirit of the context.
Impossible, sir. Impossible.
So I feel still the human intervention or human this thing is required, because otherwise the context is very important. Simply blindly translating.
You're right, because the example I gave you of the Trada software or whatever is for this commercial copies. Say agreements, legal documents, commercial documents.
Right,
So for
you're
them it's okay. Some people are happy that at least 70% is done, they'll verify and 30% changes they make. But for a creative work or a work of Shastra, that is science, I think it's still a long way for machine translation.
Yeah.
Prasad,
Yes?
in Brink, was the challenge in selection of words or in construction of sentence? Knowing Dr. SLB's style of writing?
As I told you, it was not a real challenge because prior to taking up almost the same time I was doing career translations also for auditors, then this ad agencies, etc. for publisher even. It was not, as I told you, Brink was not a challenge because there are not much traditional terms. It's a love story. It was, to that extent it was easy. All I had to do was, of course, literal translation is out of question. It will not, see, if I have to convey the same thing to a reader of Brink, what a reader of Kannada would get, then literal translation has not to be, should not be done. It will not give the same effect. So translating a spirit is what everyone does.
And what is Dr. SLB's feedback on Brink?
I told you he is very happy about it. He is recommending to his friends also.
Okay.
So that indirect appreciation also I have received from him.
And that's not very easy.
That's not. And he is not a pretentious man. He is not at all a pretentious man. So he will not simply praise also.
Sir, you had a chance to discuss with Bhairappa on what was running in his mind when he was writing Anshu, right? Was there any discussion around Anshu and Bhairappa?
No, as regards Anshu, I have not discussed as to his state of mind while writing it and all. But once he said that he himself considers it at par with his Mandra or Parva or Sakshi. But the readership, Kannada readership somehow has not read it to that extent as much as they were at Parva and Mandra. But I too feel, after having been deep into it, that it stands alongside his very major novels, Mandra, Sakshi, Nele.
I think I had told you, once I compared this novel with Paulo's, one of the Paulo's novel, right? I had written this one, right? I think if you consider the depth of Anshu with the depth of the Paulo's novel, right? Anshu stands far apart and far better, I think.
I have not read it.
Right, so this is, I mean, that's where I always felt this is lot more of Western novel than this one. It's not very easy for traditional Indian readers to, in fact, like while most of the ladies used to enjoy Parva, I haven't seen a lot of ladies enjoying Anshu, right? Probably it's a lot of Indian women, okay, whom I know, they find it very, very difficult to appreciate Anshu or recognize themselves with Anshu, right? So that's where I always thought it's a Western novel. And my belief is that probably Brink will be much better appreciated than Anshu. Just because of the kind of audience that you...
they have to merit the same. See, about ladies getting incensed about Anshu, Bhairappa has made one very clear remark about it. These women libers take flags and protest against the treatment of female characters. But till I have created characters like Manjaya in Sakshi, and there are other such womanizers, no male has taken a flag and gone and protested, I have done injustice to males.
No, I mean, this was probably one of the best feminist characters we have in
It's actually, she is good, there is nothing objective. They both are genuine, in fact.
Right.
In spite of all this, they are able to see each other's virtues.
Right.
It's a good novel.
Right.
May we take leave? Any more?
Namaste Prasad sir, this is Guru Datta.
Oh, namaskara Gurudatta.
Namaskara.
Really?
Yeah, so I don't have any questions, but I just like to share my feedback. Having known Mr. Prasad sir from more than 8 years, so I can see whatever the venture or task he picks up, I see a lot of devotion and also what we say the labor of love, which I can see in every task he picks up. And in the last year also, I observed this in the Chintana Mantana book release, which was edited by Prasad sir. And when I met Shatavadani Ganesh sir, he told, Prasad sir, tumba bhakti inda ಮಾಡಿದಾರಪ್ಪ ಈ ಕೆಲಸನ. So I was just amazed, his perseverance and the Shraddha, what I can see in every, whether it may be a small task or a big task like translating the Anchu. And also in social media I have seen, so he keeps scribing the famous talks of SLB and Dr. Ganesh sir, and puts the scribed article in social media. I can see the amount of patience and dedication he puts in, because it's not so easy, hearing the lectures and scribing it, and he has a very good master skill in it. So and also he is a good poet, so I have enjoyed his poems a lot, and I keep enjoying in padyapana.com, and he is popularly known as Vikatakavi in our circle, and he is also well known for his humorous attitude. And so there are many good qualities which I personally admire and have learned from Mr. Prasad sir. And I am very fortunate, and he also was very kind enough to share the manuscript to me before getting published. And so I could read to some extent, I couldn't read it fully. And also, so I like as Gopinath Iyer said, so the English level was very much high standard, especially for me. But it helped a lot to me, because at least I was referring for dictionary 15 to 20 words per page, and it improved my word power. So that way, Rasaswada along with Padaswada. So it was a good experience for me. And again, I will look forward to get the copy of print and get the complete experience. So thanks a lot, Prasad sir.
So I'll tell a few
all
things.
The success in future endeavors.
Thank you. So I'll make a few observations of what all you said. You said it was both a Rasaswada and learning. No. Actually, referring to a dictionary, meddles with your Rasaswada, which I have explicitly stated in the translator's note, because I have given the glossary right in the beginning. I have stated usually glossary will be at the end of a book, but they will all be treatises. This being a novel, it would not be right to go to the glossary in the midst of reading. So I have given the minimum of glossary at the beginning, so that readers familiarize themselves with it and then continuously take to reading the tale. And as regards friends, I have to tell about Gurudatta Kudli. He is a good young friend of mine. What he said was, before this was poised for publication, he said, sir, ನಮಗೆ ಪರ್ಮಿಷನ್ ಕೊಟ್ಬಿಡಿ, ನಾವೊಂದು 20-30 ಜನ ಇದ್ದೀವಿ, ನಾವು 20-30 ಕಾಪಿ ಪ್ರಿಂಟ್ ಹಾಕ್ಕೊಂಡು ನಮ್ಮ ಇಷ್ಟು ಜನರಲ್ಲಿ ಹಂಚ್ಕೊಂಡ್ಬಿಡ್ತೀವಿ ಅಂತ ಅಷ್ಟು ಉದಾರ ಭಾವದಿಂದ ಹೇಳಿದವರು ಅವರು. Gurudatta Kudli, I am really thankful to you. And Anchu is a big task, Andre. It's a small task comparative, because I did only 3 pages at a time and I took 10 years. It's not at all a big task. I split it up into 100 parts. And you told about Chintana Mantana. Chintana Mantana is a series of interviews. A number of people interviewed Bhairappa, and those I have transcribed that interviews, and that is Chintana Mantana. And he told me I am a poet. I am definitely not a poet. See, poet is one who writes a complete kavya. I am just a versifier. No doubt I have penned 1,000 metrical verses for Padyapana and elsewhere, as I said in Avadanas of Dr. Ganesh and other Avadanis. But I am not a poet, I am a versifier. Padyakara, Kavi Allah. Namaskara.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, namaskara.
I think
I will wind up. Thanks for congregating. Namaste.
and thanks a ton, sir, for taking your time and
It's my pleasure.
having this. Anyway, this has been recorded, and we'll also host it on YouTube and share the link with
All this.
with all of you again, and also on some of the groups that we have, right? So we'll also share it with Prasad sir. Right, and again, thanks a ton, sir, and it was wonderful having you here.
I should thank you.
Right, no, this
Thank you.
wonderful
Because,
having you here. And,
Your interest. Okay.
so hopefully Brink will be available with us both for reading and also for buying pretty soon. Right, we are in discussion.
It's not being sold, is it?
Pardon me?
It's not being sold, the book.
It's available on Amazon already, but as just books we are not selling. Okay, now we'll start selling with this one. We never used to sell books; it was only the circulation.
So
but now
Brink
we'll
will
also-
be the pioneering
one of the-
selling
one of the
activity
that-
at Just
yeah.
Books.
That's this month we are launching it, right? And thanks a ton, sir. Thanks a ton again.